Detective Maria Sanchez stood under the flickering streetlight in the heart of the French Quarter, her eyes fixed on the gruesome scene before her. The body of a young man lay sprawled on the cobblestones, his lifeless eyes staring blankly into the night. Strange, mystical symbols were carved into his flesh, each one more intricate and disturbing than the last. The symbols seemed to pulse with an eerie glow under the dim light, as if imbued with a sinister energy. The usually vibrant French Quarter was eerily quiet, the distant hum of jazz music now a haunting backdrop to the horror unfolding in front of Maria. She felt a chill run down her spine, despite the humid Louisiana night. "What do you make of this, Detective?" asked Officer Daniels, his face pale and drawn as he stood beside her. He had seen his share of gruesome scenes, but this one was different. There was something profoundly unnatural about it. Maria sighed, her gaze never leaving the body. "This is the third victim this month with these same markings," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. "We need to figure out what these symbols mean and who's behind this. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." She crouched down to get a closer look at the symbols, careful not to disturb any evidence. The intricate designs were both beautiful and terrifying, resembling a twisted form of ancient script. Maria knew she was dealing with something far beyond a typical homicide. Back at the precinct, Maria's desk was a chaotic mess of photographs, reports, and notes. She had been working tirelessly, trying to piece together the puzzle of these mysterious deaths. Each victim had been found in a different part of the French Quarter, but the symbols were always the same, carved with precision and purpose. Determined to find answers, Maria reached out to Dr. Elena Dubois, a local historian and expert in the occult. Elena was known for her extensive knowledge of New Orleans' dark history and its many legends. If anyone could shed light on these symbols, it was her. The next morning, Dr. Elena Dubois arrived at the precinct. She was a striking woman in her mid-40s, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. Her presence was commanding, and she carried herself with a confidence born from years of scholarly pursuit. "Detective Sanchez, I understand you've encountered something unusual," Elena said, her eyes scanning the chaotic desk before settling on Maria's face. Maria nodded, handing over the photographs of the symbols. "These were found on the bodies of the victims. I was hoping you could help us identify them." Elena examined the photos, her expression growing more serious with each passing moment. She traced a finger over the symbols, her eyes narrowing in concentration. "These symbols are ancient and powerful," she finally said, looking up at Maria. "They're used in dark rituals to harvest souls. We're dealing with a practitioner of the old arts, a witch." Maria felt a shiver run down her spine. The idea of a witch in modern-day New Orleans seemed far-fetched, but the evidence was undeniable. "A witch? Are you saying someone is using these symbols to kill people?" Elena nodded gravely. "Yes, and with each death, their power grows. The symbols you see are part of a ritual to harness the life force of the victims. The witch is gaining strength, and they won't stop until they're unstoppable." Maria took a deep breath, trying to process this new information. "How do we find this witch and stop them?" "We need to delve into the history of New Orleans," Elena replied. There are legends and records of powerful witches who lived here centuries ago. If we can uncover their secrets, we might find a way to stop this one. Together, Maria and Elena began their investigation, diving into the rich and often dark history of New Orleans. They visited libraries, archives, and old cemeteries, searching for any clue that might lead them to the witch. The city's past was filled with stories of voodoo, witchcraft, and dark magic, but one name kept appearing in their research: Isabelle Laveau, a powerful witch who had been executed in the late 18th century. According to legend, Isabelle had used dark magic to harvest souls and gain immortality. Her body was never found, and her spirit was said to still haunt the city. As they dug deeper, Maria and Elena discovered that Isabelle's followers had vowed to continue her work and bring her back. "Elena, look at this," Maria said, pointing to an old newspaper clipping they had found in the archives. It mentions that Isabelle's followers vowed to continue her work and bring her back. Elena's eyes widened. If Isabelle's followers are still active, they could be the ones behind these murders. They might be trying to resurrect her. Their investigation led them to the old Laveau family crypt, a decaying structure hidden deep within one of New Orleans' oldest cemeteries. The air was thick with the scent of moss and decay as they pried open the rusted gates and ventured inside. The crypt was filled with ancient artifacts and occult symbols, confirming their suspicions. "This is it," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. "Isabelle's lair." Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the crypt, extinguishing their lanterns. In the darkness, Maria felt a presence, malevolent and ancient. "We need to get out of here," she urged, pulling Elena towards the exit. As they stumbled out of the crypt, Maria knew they were closer to the truth than ever before. But with each step they took, the danger grew. The witch was powerful, and they were running out of time to stop her before she claimed more lives. The city of New Orleans, with its rich tapestry of history and culture, hid many secrets beneath its vibrant surface. As Detective Maria Sanchez and Dr. Elena Dubois delved deeper into the mystery, they found themselves immersed in a world of ancient rituals and dark legends. In the cool, dim light of the historical archives, Maria and Elena pored over dusty tomes and brittle parchments. The archives were located in a building that had once been a grand plantation house, now repurposed to hold the city's oldest records. The scent of old paper and leather filled the air, mingling with the faint, lingering smell of jasmine from the garden outside. "Look at this," Elena said, pointing to a particularly old book bound in cracked, worn leather. It's a journal from the late 18th century, written by a local priest. He details the trial and execution of Isabelle Laveau. Maria leaned over to read the faded ink. The priest's account described Isabelle as a powerful witch who had terrorized the city, using dark magic to harvest souls and extend her own life. The people had eventually captured her and sentenced her to death, but not before she had cursed those responsible, vowing to return. "Elena, if Isabelle was so powerful, why didn't she escape?" Maria asked, her brow furrowed in concentration. "She didn't escape because her followers completed a binding ritual just before she was captured," Elena explained. "They sealed her power within a hidden amulet, intending to use it to bring her back one day. If we can find that amulet, we might be able to stop her followers from resurrecting her. Their research led them to an old, forgotten library in the French Quarter, rumored to have a secret section dedicated to the occult. The library was a grand Gothic structure with towering shelves filled with ancient books and manuscripts. The librarian, an elderly woman with piercing eyes, seemed to know more than she let on. "You're looking for the Laveau amulet," the librarian said, her voice low and gravelly. "It's said to be hidden within the catacombs beneath the city. But beware, the path to it is fraught with danger." Armed with this new information, Maria and Elena made their way to the entrance of the catacombs, a hidden passage in the basement of an old cathedral. The air grew colder as they descended the narrow, winding staircase, the flickering light of their lanterns casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. The catacombs were a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers filled with the bones of the dead and the whispers of ancient spirits. As they navigated the dark, damp corridors, they felt the weight of history pressing down on them. "Elena, do you think we're really close?" Maria asked, her voice echoing softly in the narrow space. "I believe so," Elena replied, her eyes scanning the walls for any signs or symbols. The journal mentioned a specific symbol that would mark the entrance to the chamber where the amulet is kept. After what felt like hours, they finally found the symbol, a snake entwined around a crescent moon carved into a large stone door. Maria pushed against the door and it creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit chamber. In the center of the room, on a pedestal, lay the amulet, glowing with a faint, ethereal light. "We found it," Maria whispered, stepping forward to take the amulet. As her fingers closed around it, a sudden gust of wind extinguished their lanterns, plunging the chamber into darkness. "Who dares to disturb the resting place of Isabelle Laveau?" a voice hissed, echoing through the chamber. The air grew colder, and Maria felt a presence, dark and malevolent, closing in around them. "Elena, we need to get out of here," Maria said urgently, clutching the amulet tightly. They ran back through the catacombs, the unseen presence following them, whispering threats and curses. The walls seemed to close in, and the darkness grew thicker with each step. When they finally emerged into the open air, they both gasped in relief, but the sense of foreboding remained. Back at Elena's study, they examined the amulet more closely. It was an intricate piece of jewelry, adorned with dark stones and ancient symbols. "This is the key," Elena said. "With this, we can stop Isabelle's followers from completing the ritual." But they knew that finding the amulet was only the beginning. They had to understand its power and how to use it to break the curse. Elena reached for another book, this one filled with detailed descriptions of rituals and spells. As they worked late into the night, piecing together the ritual needed to neutralize the amulet, Maria's phone buzzed with a text message. Another body had been found, this time a young woman, her skin etched with the same symbols as the others. Maria's heart sank. They were running out of time. Isabelle's followers were growing bolder, and the witch's power was nearing its peak. With the amulet in hand, they had the means to stop her, but they needed to act quickly. Determined to put an end to the killings, Maria and Elena formulated a plan. They would confront Isabelle's followers during their next ritual, using the amulet to disrupt their dark magic and break the curse once and for all. As they prepared for the confrontation, The weight of their task settled heavily on their shoulders. The streets of New Orleans were filled with hidden dangers, and the line between the living and the dead was thin. But Maria and Elena knew that they had to face these horrors head-on to save their city from an ancient evil that threatened to consume it. Maria and Elena's preparations for the confrontation were meticulous. They knew they had to act quickly to prevent more deaths. But the growing power of the witch meant they had to be even more cautious. The amulet they had found was their only hope, and they needed to understand how to wield its power effectively. In the days leading up to the planned confrontation, Elena delved deep into her extensive collection of books on the occult, searching for any information on the ritual that could help them. The amulet, she discovered, was not just a key, but a powerful artifact that could be used to bind or release Isabel's spirit. The amulet was designed to contain her power, Elena explained one evening as they sat in her cluttered study, the air thick with the scent of old books and candles. But it can also be used to sever her connection to our world permanently. We need to perform a binding ritual using the amulet as the focal point. Maria listened intently, her mind racing with thoughts of the upcoming confrontation. And we need to do this during their ritual, right? When they're at their most vulnerable. Elena nodded. Exactly. The ritual will be a high-risk moment for them as well. If we can interrupt it, we have a chance to weaken them and use the amulet to seal Isabel's spirit. Their research led them to a chilling discovery. The followers of Isabelle Laveau were planning a grand ritual on the night of the full moon, when the barrier between the living and the dead was thinnest. This ritual would take place in the heart of the French Quarter, at an abandoned mansion that had once been a site of dark ceremonies. As the night of the full moon approached, Maria and Elena gathered their supplies, candles, chalk, and the ancient texts that would guide them through the binding ritual. They also armed themselves with more conventional weapons, just in case. Maria strapped a gun to her hip, while Elena carried a ceremonial dagger, its blade etched with protective symbols. On the night of the ritual, the city seemed to hold its breath. The streets of the French Quarter were unusually quiet, the usual revelry replaced by an eerie silence. Maria and Elena made their way to the abandoned mansion, its decaying facade a stark reminder of the dark history that lay within. The mansion loomed ahead, its windows like dark, hollow eyes watching their every move. They could see flickering candlelight through the cracked windows, and the faint sound of chanting reached their ears. The air was heavy with a sense of impending doom. "Ready?" Maria asked, her voice steady despite the tension in her muscles. Elena nodded, clutching the amulet tightly. "Let's do this." They crept towards the mansion, careful to stay hidden in the shadows. As they approached, they could see the cultists gathered in the main hall, their hoods drawn and faces obscured. At the center of the room, an altar was draped with dark cloth, and candles formed a circle around it. The leader of the cult, a tall, imposing figure, held a book of dark rituals and chanted in an ancient language. Maria and Elena slipped into the mansion through a side door, their footsteps silent on the dusty floor. They made their way to a vantage point where they could observe the ritual without being seen. The atmosphere was charged with dark energy, and Maria could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "We need to wait for the right moment," Elena whispered. "When the leader begins the incantation to release Isabel's spirit, that's when we strike." They watched as the cultists continued their preparations. The leader raised his hands and the chanting grew louder, the words echoing off the walls. The air seemed to vibrate with the power of the ritual, and Maria felt a deep sense of unease. Suddenly, the leader's voice reached a crescendo, and the other cultists joined in, their voices merging into a single ominous chant. The symbols carved into the floor began to glow, and a dark mist started to rise from the altar. "Now," Elena whispered urgently. Maria and Elena sprang into action. Elena held the amulet high, chanting the binding spell they had prepared. The cultists turned in shock, their chanting faltering as they saw the intruders. The leader snarled and raised his hand, directing a blast of dark energy towards them. Maria fired her gun, the shot echoing through the hall. The bullet struck the leader's hand, causing him to drop the book. The dark energy dissipated and the cultists scattered, their formation broken. "Elena, keep chanting," Maria shouted, aiming her gun at the nearest cultist. Elena's voice grew louder and more confident as she recited the binding spell. The amulet glowed with a bright, pure light, pushing back the dark mist that had begun to fill the room. The leader of the cult tried to regain control, but the power of the amulet was too strong. The cultists, realizing they were losing, began to flee, but Maria and Elena held their ground. The light from the amulet intensified, and the symbols on the floor started to fade. The dark mist retreated, and the oppressive energy in the room began to dissipate. With one final, powerful chant, Elena completed the spell. The amulet's light flared, filling the room with a blinding brilliance. The leader of the cult let out a scream as the binding spell took hold, severing Isabel's connection to the mortal world. As the light faded, the room fell silent. The cultists were gone, and the dark energy that had filled the mansion was no more. Maria and Elena stood in the center of the hall, breathing heavily but victorious. "We did it," Maria said, her voice filled with relief. Elena nodded, a weary smile on her face. "Isabel's spirit is bound. The curse is broken." They made their way out of the mansion, the first light of dawn breaking over the French Quarter. The city, once shrouded in darkness, now seemed to glow with a renewed sense of hope. Maria and Elena knew that their battle was won, but they also knew that the shadows of New Orleans held many more secrets. As they walked through the quiet streets, they felt a sense of accomplishment and camaraderie. They had faced an ancient evil and emerged victorious, their bond strengthened by the trials they had endured. And though their journey was far from over, they knew that together they could face whatever darkness lay ahead. As dawn broke over New Orleans, casting a golden light on the city that had just been saved from a dark ritual, Detective Maria Sanchez and Dr. Elena Dubois felt a temporary sense of relief. However, their task was far from over. The ritual had been interrupted, but the full power of Isabelle Laveau had not been fully unleashed. They needed to ensure that the witch's curse was permanently broken. Back at Elena's study, they reviewed their notes and the ancient texts. The amulet, now dim and lifeless, lay on the table between them. "We've interrupted the ritual, but we need to perform the binding spell one more time, properly, to ensure Isabel's spirit is permanently sealed," Elena said, her voice tired but determined. Maria nodded, glancing at the amulet. Where do we need to go to do this? The mansion. Elena shook her head. No, the final binding must be done at the place where Isabel was originally executed. It's the only way to ensure her spirit is bound for good. Their research led them to an old square in the heart of the French Quarter, a place where public executions had taken place in the 18th century. Now a popular tourist spot, it was hard to imagine the grim events that had once transpired there. As they prepared for the final ritual, the air seemed to grow colder and the shadows longer, a reminder of the power they were about to face. They arrived at the square just as night fell. The bustling activity of the day had died down, leaving the area eerily quiet. Maria and Elena set up their ritual space in the center of the square, lighting candles and drawing protective symbols around the perimeter. The amulet was placed on a small makeshift altar, and Elena began to chant the binding spell. The atmosphere grew tense as Elena's chanting filled the air. The candles flickered and a chill wind swept through the square. Maria stood guard, her eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of danger. She knew the cultists might return, desperate to complete their interrupted ritual. As Elena's voice rose in intensity, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Shadows moved unnaturally around the square, and the air grew thick with the sense of a malevolent presence. Stay focused, Elena, Maria urged, feeling the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a hooded cultist with a dagger in hand. He lunged towards Elena, but Maria was ready. She fired her gun, the shot echoing through the square. The cultist fell to the ground, his dagger clattering on the cobblestones. "Elena, hurry!" Maria shouted, her voice filled with urgency. Elena continued her chant, her voice unwavering despite the growing danger. The amulet began to glow once more, its light pushing back the encroaching darkness. More cultists appeared, but Maria fought them off, her determination fueled by the need to protect Elena and finish the ritual. As the battle raged, the power of the amulet grew stronger. The glowing light intensified, and the symbols on the ground began to shimmer. The air crackled with energy, and Maria felt a surge of hope. They were close. "Elena, it's working," Maria called out, her voice barely audible over the howling wind and the sounds of the struggle. With a final powerful chant, Elena completed the binding spell. The amulet's light flared, enveloping the square in a blinding brilliance. The remaining cultists screamed in agony as the dark energy was torn from them, leaving them powerless. The ground stopped shaking and the oppressive presence in the air vanished. As the light faded, the square fell silent. The cultists lay unconscious or fled, their plans thwarted. Maria and Elena stood in the center, breathing heavily but triumphant. The amulet lay on the altar, its glow fading to a soft, steady light, a sign that the binding spell had been successful. "We did it," Elena said, her voice filled with exhaustion and relief. "Isabel's spirit is bound. The curse is finally broken." Maria nodded, looking around the now quiet square. "New Orleans is safe, for now." They gathered their things and left the square, the first light of dawn breaking over the city. The sense of accomplishment and relief was palpable, but they knew that the shadows of New Orleans held many more secrets. Together they had faced an ancient evil and emerged victorious. their journey was far from over. In the days that followed, Maria and Elena continued to work together, investigating other mysterious occurrences and dark legends in the city. Their bond, forged in the heat of battle, grew stronger with each case they solved. They knew that as long as they stood together, they could protect New Orleans from whatever darkness lay ahead. As they walked through the French Quarter, the city alive with its usual vibrant energy, Maria turned to Elena. "Do you think we'll ever have a normal case again?" Elena laughed softly. "In New Orleans? I doubt it. But that's what makes it exciting, doesn't it?" Maria smiled, feeling a sense of camaraderie and trust. "Agreed. To facing the unknown, then." They raised their coffee cups in a silent toast, ready to confront whatever mysteries and dangers awaited them. Together, they were a formidable team, dedicated to uncovering the secrets of their city and protecting it from the shadows that lurked just beyond the light.